Let's talk about your current job. So like, what does a typical day of work look like for you? What do you actually do all day? What skills did you find most valuable to like day-to-day type stuff? And just maybe talk a little bit about like your job now.
So on a day-to-day basis, I mean, my first day I walked in and they handed me a computer and I sat down and started setting up my dev environment. It went pretty well. I've heard horror stories, but I've set up 3 local dev environments this year and they've all gone really well. By day 2, I just kind of dove in and I was exploring the code and I grabbed some bugs on their ticketing system. They were using Jira and started writing code and fixing bugs. A typical day, I'll go in, I'll check email, check to see if there are errors on production. Usually you'll get emails from some service like Airbreak that reports errors. So, and for me, it wasn't that I necessarily knew how to go out and solve them, but I just wanted to collect as much information as I could about the app. Checking email. I'll go out and look at GitHub, maybe see what pull requests other people have done. If I've got any pull requests out there, I might go out and just review them again, see if there's anything that I missed or should have added in or a comment, anything like that. Review what I did the day before and what I'm going to do that day. I love to keep a notebook and just write down sort of the tickets that I was working on, tickets that I did work on, and what status they're in. It's easy to get into your stand-up meeting and kind of be like, I don't remember what I did. So I always like to review that a little bit before I go into my stand-up. We would have our morning stand-up, talk about what bugs we were working, what tickets we were working on, what we were going to do, whether there were pull requests. We as a team spend a few minutes doing bug triage. So going through any Airbreak errors that had popped up and try to figure out if they were critical or not, if they needed to be fixed right away, figure out what to do there. Of course, there are too many meetings. I think, you've got product meetings and engineering meetings and developer only meetings. You might spend some time doing estimating of projects, doing sprint planning, figuring out what you're going to put into the current sprint. At the end of your sprint, you do a sprint retrospective to talk about what went well. You might have some time set aside to share code among the team, especially if it's a bigger team, so that everybody knows what other people are working on or to help each other out. And then, if you're lucky, you get half to 2/3 of your time spent coding. Some days I did, some days it felt like 4 or 5 hours of other things going on. So that was my first job that I was at for about 12 weeks. Total company size was about 50 people. We had a dev team of 7 people plus a few analytics people, and we worked with product and user interface. So I think that's part of why there were just more meetings there, because there was a lot more communication. I'm now in a company where I'm person number 7. I'm one of 3 developers. So there's a VP of engineering and another developer. So it's much less formal. We might have a stand-up. We might not. We might just kind of say, hey, I'm doing this. And I don't really have meetings there. So that feels very different. But I still check for errors, check my email, see if there's anything come in, review what I did the day before, think about what I'm going to do that day, find out if there's anything blocking me, anything I need help on, and dive in.
My company has barely any meetings. So we have 1 meeting every day at 10:30 for our stand-up. And other than that, we have every 2 weeks, we have a sprint retrospective, like Aaron said, where we talk about last sprint, plan for that sprint. And other than that, it's pretty seldom that we have to get into a meeting. So maybe once a month we have a different meeting. And then twice a year we have a company-wide meeting, and that's it. So I'm pretty lucky that they let us just do our job, which is a funny thing to say. I log on in the morning and I check my pull requests from the night before to see if they were merged, see if they have any comments that I have to address, see if there's any regressions in, stuff that people are QA testing, which means that if we thought it was good enough for QA and then QA says it's not good enough to go into the release, we have to do a regression, which is just fixing it. And then after that, I just start working on tickets that I had, stockpiled that aren't done from the day before. And then we have our stand up and we talk about, what we did yesterday, what we're going to do today, if we need to pair with anybody, if anybody needs help, anybody has any blockers on their code. And then usually just work the rest of the day on pull requests, trying to get your code done, get it up, help other people, with their pull requests, if they need code reviews or if they need pairing. That sounds very boring because that is just about every single day for me. That's how it goes. I could do it blindfolded at this point. But it's the coding that gets it to be really interesting. And it's never the same. I don't have the same day twice, really, because I'm just constantly working on different tickets, whether it's new features, whether it's refactoring old code or adding tests for old code that doesn't have coverage. and our onboarding, which is bringing on new schools, which is the more monotonous type. So it's mostly new features and refactoring old code right now, which is cool.
So we have a 9 a.m. stand-up on Slack every day. So that's when we kind of just post 3 things: what we're working on, what we're working on next, and any blockers. Blockers are anything that maybe we need from someone else or any help that we need to be able to unblock ourselves. And we just kind of do that on Slack every day at 9 a.m. So nothing too formal, nothing too complicated on that. We're a startup with a lot of movement right now. So there's a lot of last minute things to tweak, campaigns to run. So there's a lot of action going on in that sense. So it's kind of hard to just say, hey, I get in, I look at my issues, and that's, the only thing I work on. I look at issues, but then I'll also see what's going on for the day. What kind of events we have. Do we have any kind of investor meetings coming up that we want to tweak some of the stuff? Do we want to build any special type of routes for just a certain segment that we're trying to target? So there's a lot of week by week, day to day special tweaks on what we're already doing. Kind of just building that out and trying to get it out as quickly as possible, as sanely as possible also. So before we do anything else, I get an extra pair of eyes, do a PR, make sure everything's running well. But we do launch fast. So it's build one day, launch pretty much the next. Whenever we have a little bit of that downtime, that's when I'll go back to the ticket, see what we have, any bugs that we run into, and work on those. But it is a fast pace, but it is fun because I get to build a lot of stuff. And because of that, I get to break a lot of stuff. So as I get to break a lot of stuff, I get to learn a lot also about what works, why it didn't work. And so that's an interesting pace, an interesting way of learning. I'm not sure if it's for everyone. If you're not comfortable in that type of structure, then it might not be the best scenario. You might be better off somewhere where there's a little bit more of time to build things out and just structure to everything. For me, it's worked out well. I think since I'm starting to work, and I've started to work on the Code Newbie code base as well, and Saran comes from she was a ThoughtBot for a while. So that's a lot more structured. That's where I get to see like a different approach to building instead of just let's break everything and hope it works again. So it's an interesting balance. But as far as my day-to-day goes, that's kind of my routine.